Namaskar, hello and welcome to Sansad TV. I am Tina Jha. You're watching Perspective. So the budget session of Parliament will begin on Monday, the 31st of January. It will commence with President Ramnath Kovind addressing both houses. The session will be held in two parts. The first part of the session will conclude on 11th February, and after a month-long recess, part two of the session will begin on the 14th of March and conclude on the 8th of April. So on 31st January, after President Ramnath Kovind's address to both houses, the economic survey will be tabled. The union budget will be presented on the 1st of February. What will be the agenda of the government in this session, in addition to the budget and other financial business? What will be the strategy of other parties in the upcoming session after a not so fruitful previous winter session is what we will try and understand on the show today. Joining me are three distinguished panelists. With me in the studio is Mr. Raghu Ramakrishna Raju, Member of Parliament, Lok Sabha. He represents the YSR Congress Party in the House. Welcome, sir, to Sansad TV. And joining us virtually is Mr. KJ Alphonse, Member of Parliament, Rajya Sabha. He represents the BJP in the Upper House. And senior journalist, Mr. Shekhar Iyer. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me on the program today on Sansad TV. Mr. Alphonse, since you're a member of the ruling party, let me begin the program with you. Let's try and understand what are going to be the government's priorities in this budget session of Parliament.
Let's maybe dwell with about the state of the economy maybe in a few minutes. I think the economy is done fairly well in spite of this pandemic, which is still raging across the world. The IMF, which had predicted a growth rate of 9.5% this financial year, has now scaled it down to 9%, which I think is still extremely good. The tax collection, both direct and indirect tax collection, has been very buoyant. It has been extremely good. It is better than what is estimated in the budget. So that is the very good part of the economy. The fiscal deficit approximately would be about 6.5%. I think it would be approximately within the range in which was a budget estimate, 6.8%. It might, marginally go up, but I think it's going to stay more or less at that. The inflation year-on-year basis, CPI was about 5.59%, and the food inflation has been only around 4.05%. So these are the silver linings. The capital expenditure has gone up in this financial year to about 2.2% of the GDP, up from about 2.5% of the GDP, up from 2.2% last year and about 2% the year before that. So these are some of the great indicators. But some of the areas in which the economy is lagging behind are private investment has been lagging behind to a certain extent. I think the consumption, the rural consumption particularly, has been lagging behind. So these are the areas in which we need to focus. We also need to focus on some of the sectors like automobile, the housing, real estate industry, because real estate industry is the second largest creator of jobs in the country, MSME sector. So these are the key areas in which the government needs to focus on. So these are the present state of affairs. And I think I will come to what are my suggestions, what I expect from the budget. Maybe I'll come to that.
Absolutely. I'll come back to you a little later on the program and understand also on the kind of legislative agenda that's there on the government's priority list, apart from the financial affairs. So, Mr. Raju, the economy is doing fairly well. We are on the cusp of recovery. What actually the finance minister has to promise, we'll have to wait and watch till the 1st of February. But largely, if we look at this session, how is your party preparing for the upcoming session? What is your strategy going forth?
No, this session should be a smooth session. Number one, because of the elections, the rush won't be much. And because many people, they would be busy with in their respective states and UP election being there. This would be quite, I don't foresee any problem of any agitation or anything. This will be a very smooth session with utmost productivity. That's what I expect. And that Rajya Sabha issue also is only for that session. So I don't foresee any problem even for Rajya Sabha, of course, though I'm a member of Lok Sabha. So,
and are there any issues that the YSR Congress Party has thought of that is going to raise in the upcoming session?
I don't foresee, because this is predominantly a budget session, and so based on the whatever the response to Honorable President's speech, so we don't foresee any problem from. Okay, we are neither opposition nor ruling party, but
Okay, so you seem to be very hopeful, but whether Mr. Iyer is hopeful or not, let me go and understand from him. Mr. Iyer, the previous winter session ended amid acrimony. All of us saw what happened after 12 members were suspended. There was confrontation between the Treasury benches, the opposition parties, and because of which we saw endless disruptions. The productivity was impacted. Now going forth, although this is going to be largely dedicated to the budget, but how do you see this session? Is it going to be any better in terms of productivity?
Well, since this is a budget session, it's a very important session, and the presentation of the budget itself is being looked forward by different sections, including the opposition. And the whole focus is on how are we recovering from the our economic recovery following COVID. So everyone is looking at the budget, what kind of package will be there to help the country, accelerate faster from the COVID. So there's a lot of focus on the budget. But then, Tina, we have seen session after session. On the first day, you hear all pious statements saying that, we are willing to discuss everything on the floor of the House. And then things change as soon as I think the first coffee, as the members of parliament have had the first coffee, because right now the mood is very political. If you look at the key elections that are taking place in Uttar Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Punjab, Goa, and Manipur. Now, this is a very important elections for both the ruling party as well as the opposition. So I do expect, some kind of a spillover from the kind of rhetoric and political debate that is going on from the election arena to the parliament. We have to accept that.
Absolutely. And going forth, recently, as you pointed out, session after session, what we've been witnessing is that parliament is being used by several political parties as a means, as a platform to actually reach out to their voters. And looking at elections in 5 states, is there a worry, is there a concern that once again that could happen?
There is definitely there is a lot of apprehension in the sense that, the parliament time should not be wasted. You can have a very lively debate. You can use all the instruments that are there provided in the rules of business. Opposition can raise any issue, give proper notice. But then what we have witnessed, the past experience is the opposition is more keen on not having a debate. Rather, you find that there's a lot of hangama and then trying to force something that the government also is forced to adopt a strong stand against the disruptions in the House. Then the whole thing spill overs to the onto the streets, in the sense that they all come out and make all kinds of arguments and allegations. This drama, I think, should not be repeated, at least in this budget session, because of the COVID conditions. They are going to meet 5 hours each separately, like they did last year.
Yes.
In 2020. So therefore, the members of parliament would also be very careful, because we have seen even this COVID has not spared a number of parliamentary staff also. So time is precious. So we could hear good debates, because there are a lot of things to be brought forward to the parliament. Everybody is looking at whether the government will bring the cryptocurrency bill, which is a very important bill. But the indications are the government may need some more time for regulating the cryptocurrencies. So I think that's one thing everyone looking forward. Of course, there are important social legislations, like the government decision to age the age for marriage for girls from 18 to 21. On par with boys. I think that is also very important legislation. So these are the things which are there on the agenda. Therefore, one would expect that the legislative business is also taken forward, and also the opposition has its say on number of issues which it wants to raise.
Certainly.
Tina.
Mr. Alphonse, time is very precious. Both houses will be sitting separately as COVID precautions are in place. But looking at the situation in Rajya Sabha particularly, it's been quite grim. The last time around in winter session, the productivity was only about 48%. Now we hear the Rajya Sabha Secretariat has released a code of conduct for all members of the upper house. Do you think that could take care of proceedings and we will see a smooth affair this time around?
Gina, you see, I'm very apprehensive because last session was completely wiped out. There'll be no discussion most of the time, except I think one day or something. I feel terrible about this whole thing. I completely agree with Shekhar. This kind of disruptive politics happening in Parliament is such a bad example to the whole country. In fact, I keep telling you in all my interviews, the best weapon available to a member of Parliament is the mic in the Parliament. You can abuse the government. You can really, absolutely butcher us, kill us, do anything that you want. Use a microphone. It's a power of you as a representative of people to be presenting the views. You don't like the government, you rip us apart. Do that. Instead of that, disrupting the Parliament, I think it's such a shame. When I was a minister for almost 2 years, I never got an opportunity to open my mouth to answer one question in the Parliament. I think it's so terrible because the people of this country have the right to know, and to do this kind of stuff, I think is horrible. Now, let me come to the issues which I think are important, because I think the time is very short here. I think the country expects this government to be presenting a budget which is going to be very pro-growth, because in spite of we having a fairly decent growth rate this financial year in financial year 22, I really think we need to take this forward. We have to really increase the capital expenditure dramatically in some key sectors. I will also come to those sectors which are very important. We need to increase the rural spending, which means increasing the allocation for PMGSY, Manrega, and also for rural housing. These are the sectors which create employment, because the moment you create employment in the rural areas, that increases rural consumption. Now, also the increased allocation for as capital expenditure, especially on things like Gati Shakti, which is basically a platform to bring in all the infrastructure ministries on a platform to ensure coordination, wherein about 100 lakh crore of rupees is going to be spent over the next 5 years. The National Master Plan for the National Infrastructure Pipeline, the National Bank for Infrastructure and Development. I think these are the key institutions through which very large amount of public money will be spent, and this should be the core expenditure around which the government intends to create rural demand and increase the rural employment. I think there's a huge opportunity for this, and I'm sure that is going to be the focus. And secondly, I think there is also going to be some kind of incentive for people to put in more money. Like one of the things which I think there possibly could be some kind of a concession by the finance minister could be on increasing the limit under Section 24B on the Income Tax Act for the interest on housing loan. Now the limit is 2 lakh to be increased to 5 lakhs. I mean, this will do two things. One is increase the availability of housing. There's a large stock of housing available. It can create employment. It can increase rural consumption. So that's one of the things which will be a good thing to do. Of course, there's going to be a whole lot of demand on reducing the direct tax rates, but I do not think that is going to happen. Most probably not. I also think that there's going to be a demand for decreasing the taxes, the indirect taxes, the corporate taxes. I don't think there will be going to be any change in the corporate taxes or income tax rates. I don't think so, because the government needs to spend huge amount of money on creating jobs and creating rural infrastructure. And therefore, I don't think the government can afford to give such concessions.
Absolutely. And considering
and
the fact that we are still amidst the pandemic and an ongoing third wave, Mr. Raju, since we're speaking about expectations, the government too has its limitations. But what would be your expectations from the upcoming budget?
My expectation, of course, as I said in the beginning, majority of the things, Mr. Alphonse has explained it in a very perfect and minute manner. I can only add a little more to that, because he has covered most of the things. Number one, last year we have anticipated around 15 lakh deficit. It has come down by more than half. So that's a wonderful job that was done by this government. Really, I appreciate for that. And the taxation, the collections were really excellent beyond expectations without increasing even a small percentage. In fact, they are decreased in certain sectors. But despite that, they were able to increase the revenue, and it's a wonderful show. The way they attacked the corona, despite the pandemic, the death rate is the lowest in the world. It has come down, and they did a wonderful job.
And our recovery has been quite good.
Yes, recovery is quite good, and this Omicron also, thanks to the vaccination drive by the Honorable Prime Minister, it has reached the masses, and even in advanced countries, the percentage of vaccination is not as much as that's been done in our country, despite lesser educated people. But the way government could influence them to have the vaccination and the importance of vaccination, it was all done in a tremendous way. And one thing what I could add to more than what Alphonse has added is that Section 81C, where there is a limit of 1.5 lakhs for savings, if that can be increased to at least 2.5 lakhs, so that would be of real help more than the, anyhow, as he said, corporate tax, nobody is expecting any concession beyond. It was done enough for good encouragement in the last year itself. So we don't expect anything as far as the corporate sector is concerned.
How much scope is there for the finance minister to actually incorporate all of that?
Yeah, because
will be interesting to see.
Yeah, because the deficit has come down. No? So that 1.5, if it can be increased to 2.5, that would be the investment limit. So that would be of great help.
Okay, let's all hope that there is some relief that we are talking about. Mr. Iyer, another, I think, interesting thing to watch out for will be a number of analysts have actually called it an election budget. Looking at elections in 5 states, they're saying there will, of course, be populist measures that will be announced by the government. Now, how will the government strike this balance between politics and economy? Because we are still recovering. We haven't recovered fully from the pandemic-induced devastation caused to our economy. And at the same time, elections, of course, because it's going to be very important, and particularly in Uttar Pradesh. So how will the government strike this right balance between politics and economy?
Tina, if you're asking whether the government will avoid further increasing the burden by way of taxes, yes, definitely it would not do. Not just because of elections in Uttar Pradesh or in other states. Very simple fact that, at the moment, the government is looking at ways to accelerate economy, ways to, further incentivize different sectors to pick up and move forward. So in that situation, the government would definitely look at the revenue side, but at the same time, we'll see what all can be done further, because a lot of measures have already been announced through the, last year we saw a number of incentives being given, number of intra-subvention schemes, to help the small industries, small scale enterprises. A lot has already happened. So you could see in the budget a further consolidation of these several schemes, several measures to, boost economy. And at the same time, also look at more tax complaints, and incentives for tax complaints. That could be a very interesting sector to look, because we have seen reports in the last few days how even the corporate sector is looking at, straight away, paying the tax and not looking for some kind of exemptions and all that, because there is lots of janjat in terms of, compliance. So you could see some innovative approach to a taxation side. At the same time, further incentivizing the growth. I think that's the key thing. And also, the government would be looking at the schemes that have already been rolled out for farmers, for boosting agriculture, for diversification in agriculture. These are the areas that will definitely catch attention, because election or no election, these are key areas. And we know for a fact that the Prime Minister does not believe in that kind of populism. Just because there is election somewhere, you give some bonus. He doesn't believe in that. In fact, that is a challenge for the BJP, because compared to the previous governments, he has been very particular that there is a fiscal discipline, that deficit is under control. And nothing is done for the sake of headlines, because when you're coming to economy has gone through a great period of stress. You have had you had the COVID first wave and second wave, then some kind of you can call it a third wave. But then fortunately, we are recovering from that. The reports are coming that a lot of COVID cases are falling. So this is the kind of thing. So we are looking at a scenario. You have the whole year ahead. So government will definitely keep in mind and take decisions as and when the situation improves further. So
Absolutely.
that's the biggest thing. Of course, there are different sectors. Some core sectors are looking for relief. They have already petitioned the government. So the budget will perhaps respond to that SOS coming from certain sectors. So that is also a thing.
Yes, some
That is why
sectors which
it's
are seeking
important.
expansion of the already announced schemes, some
Yeah.
sectors which are still stressed and reeling under the impact of the pandemic. Okay, Mr. Alphonse, for the quick concluding round of questions, the government has not listed out the important bills that it is going to bring forth in the budget session. So, of course, there will be financial business. But apart from that, is there a sense within the party of the kind of important legislative agenda that the government is going forth in this session?
Tina, before I come to that, kindly give me a minute to explain. There is one area in which I have a little worry. This is on fiscal consolidation because, there are two schools of economics saying that now it's time because inflation was kind of catching up. According to me, inflation is well within control. But there's a school of thought which thinks that to control inflation, we need to really have fiscal consolidation, which means bring down the fiscal deficit. Now, I don't agree with this. I hope this kind of hawks in the economies don't really prevail. I think we should spend more money. We should not really worry about the fiscal deficit, which is about 6.8%. I think there is some kind of a temptation to bring it down to 6 to 6.3%. I think that would not really be ideal, would not be appropriate because we still need to have a huge amount of cap expenditure during this corona period. So, because unless the government spends big money, it's not going to happen. And therefore, I hope there will not be an attempt at fiscal consolidation. With that, let me come to the second, to answer your question. Well, I think, as Mr. Shekhar has pointed out here, that the marriage age limit increase, I think that will be a legislation which might come up. Now, I do not know other crucial legislations about the data protection bill. I do not know whether it is ready to be taken up in the parliament. That would be an extremely important legislation to be taken up. But of course, I would say it needs wide consultation. It was before the parliament committee. I think they have submitted the report, but then still it would require, I think, a whole lot of application of mind by the government, by all the stakeholders, once again, with the recommendations of the parliament committee, because it's too important a bill to be rushed through. But I'm sure the government is absolutely aware of its importance, and therefore it will do only things which I think are appropriate and bring it to the appropriate time. And of course, I would like to place on record the great appreciation Honorable Member of Parliament, Mr. Raju, has had for what the government has done. But these are real facts,
Yes.
which so often is absolutely disputed and not accepted by certain political parties. And see, when the government does something good, I think people should be willing to accept that and say, these are the good things done by the government. If we fail in something, point out that. I'm extremely happy that the Honorable Mr. Raju has pointed out what the positive things which the government has done. And also a veteran journalist like Mr. Shekhar has placed on record his appreciation for the positive things which the government has done. I'm very grateful to that.
Okay. Mr. Raju, one final question from you. And before we wind up the discussion, one interesting thing going forward that's going to happen ahead of this session is that the Speaker of the Lok Sabha launched Digital Sansad. Now, in this age of digital, where everything is online, it's in fact become a necessity. How useful is it going to be for the citizens at large?
Yes, it is certainly useful. Otherwise, these days, everyone has to work and no one can sit at home in front of the TV. So wherever they are, it's easy for them to look at their representative while they are at work. It's very convenient that digital, in fact, we will start using it. In fact, Parliament had sent us all the details. So it will be really very convenient, of course, in the perspective of the people who would like to watch their MP talking, and it would also make the MPs also more responsible. As Mr. Alphonse has said, it is an opportunity for the people to raise their voice and to address the concerns of the people, need not necessarily be their own constituency. So everybody would have access to watch you, what you talk, how you talk and all. And in fact, it would make The members also, it should make more responsible. And it's really a very good initiative by Om Birla ji, and it would certainly click. And before I conclude, I would like to add one thing with regard to the populistic measures. Of course, recently in Supreme Court also, the matter has come up that some states are coming up with some popular measures which are going beyond the income of the states, and they were depending upon the borrowings. Yes, no doubt many states were doing, and in fact my state is not an exception. We have borrowed 3.6 lakh crores in the last 2.5 years, which is much more than the last 60 years debt of our state because of the populistic measures. But I must say here that Shri Narendra Modi ji is never for populistic measures. Whatever rupee he spends, he wanted to improve that every penny for the productivity, and he doesn't believe in freebies. Even if there is a freebie, it should motivate that person to work hard and work towards the economy. So yes, everyone must learn from Modi ji, because he never believes in freebies. He believes in hard work, and he knows how to make people work hard.
Okay, okay.
Yes.
So going forward, of course, there are huge expectations from the budget, and on the legislative agenda as well, some important bills, as Mr. Iyer and Mr. Alphonse pointed out. The cryptocurrency bill, whether or not it's going to be brought in the budget session, will be interesting to watch. Time is running out. I'll have to wind up the discussion on that note. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program today, sharing your thoughts with us and our viewers. It was a pleasure having all three of you on the show. So with that, I'll have to wind up the program today. That's it from us on this edition of Perspective. Thanks very much to all our viewers as well for their time.